Hello, welcome to VR Chat's Endgame show. Today we're here with Deadly Donor, who is a molecular biologist, and we're going to talk about the coronavirus. Take it away.
That is correct.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. Excited for the show.
That
And
is
Deadly has
not
some
the
awesome
right
slides.
part.
We just got our slides
It's
working
not.
again, so
Kind of.
perfect.
That is how I wanted to start. Yeah, first of all, maybe a short disclaimer. The presenter broke, so I have to run to my PC and switch the slides manually. It's a little bit of a hassle. So, yeah. But yeah, today I want to talk about the so-called Wuhan seafood market pneumonia virus. Holy shit, talking. Also known as 2019 NCOV, which stands for novel coronavirus. I quickly want to go through the question: what is this virus? How much will it affect us? And will it kill us all? Which is probably the most interesting question of them all. But before that, I have a few videos that Psych sent me about the coronavirus, filmed by the wonderful Matt Cram YouTube channel. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can just play the first one because I think it's a good overview of that. And also, before you do that, what's the seafood market part of it?
That
I
is
didn't
the
know.
part. It's in virology. It's tradition to basically name a virus after the place where it first occurred. In this case, the Wuhan seafood market. In the Chinese town of Wuhan. So yeah, that's basically where it comes from.
Okay, cool.
Maybe a short thing about that though, this is not the final name. We will probably rename it once we are completely sure what it actually is and what caused it. But yeah.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, this video is like a 7-minute video describing the what it is. So
To just give a little overview on the virus.
Okay, thank you.
Cram.com. Welcome to another MedCram lecture. One of the things that's in the news and hopefully goes away real soon is the coronavirus epidemic from 2019. Now, as it turns out, it started on the last day of 2019 and has been with us in 2020. Let's talk a little bit about coronavirus, that virus that seems to have come from Wuhan, China. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on and the updates. So it seems as though this virus came from, as we mentioned, Wuhan, China. They've seemed to have pinpointed this to an animal market. In fact, a number of the people that were hospitalized, and we'll talk about that article in The Lancet, came from this animal market. And as of January 25th, 2020, they estimate about 1,300 people have been infected, and about 41 people to date, as of January 25th, have died. And of course, this number is expected to go up. Where is it spread to? Well,
And
other
it goes
than
a lot.
China and Asia, this has spread already to Australia, France, and the United States. Specifically, 2 cases, one in Chicago, a woman in Chicago, and a man in Washington State.
And now there's 12.
And we'll talk more about that. We expect that to go up. But what really is going on with a coronavirus? And why is this one so different? So we've known about coronaviruses for a long time. It's an RNA virus, so we know that. And let's face it, there's coronaviruses all over the place in humans, and they usually cause the common cold. What's unusual about this one is that this one seems to have jumped from one that is already in an animal to that being in a human. So there's tons of coronaviruses that infect animals. But what has seemed to have happened here for the first time is this one has jumped into a human that a human hasn't seen before. And how could that happen? Well, it could be from a mutation, and that's typically what happens is there's a mutation in the protein in this virus that allows it to bind to human proteins. And that allows the virus to get inside of the cells of humans. And if it can replicate, then it can spread throughout that human body and then perhaps spread to another human body. So what needs to happen? There has to be a mutation. And that mutation is already there in the animal. And then there has to be close contact with that animal, either living with that animal or eating that animal to get that mutated virus that normally lives in an animal into the human being. So when that virus then gets into the human being, it's got to be able to replicate so that there's more viruses, and then it has to be able to spread to another human being, and that is what's going to cause an epidemic. So how does that happen? Well, there's got to be replication, as we just said. And they believe that that virus can replicate inside the human. And then how does it spread to another human? As opposed to just another animal spreading it to another human, well, the way that you get an epidemic is with replication occurring inside that person, that index infected person, and then it spreads. How would it spread? Well, it could spread by airborne, so that's why you'd want to wear a mask, or close contact, so a loved one, contaminated surfaces, so that's why you'd have to wash your hands very carefully, or rarely fecal contamination. But these are the things that you can attack to prevent the spread of this virus. But we've seen this before. And where have we seen this coronavirus type of thing happening before? Well, you all may remember SARS back in 2002. This was from bats, which is where the virus was, infecting a mammal called civets, and then they being eaten or living close to humans. Fortunately, we haven't seen any more infections since 2004. But that was a big thing back in 2002. Then MERS, which had to do with the Middle East, had to do with camels. Viruses that lived in the camel. And if you ate the camel or drank the camel's milk, you could get this type of infection. Now, the new one is humans with this infection called NCOV, which is what they're calling it now. So NCOV is the new coronavirus that's coming out of Wuhan, China. 2019, and that has gone into humans. But the question is, who did it come from? What is the host? So what they did was they sequenced this virus in the Journal of Medical Virology, and we'll put a link to this article in our description below so you can see it. What they did was they sequenced this RNA, and they compared it to 200 other RNA virus coronaviruses that are known to infect animals. And the one they came up with, which was a match that was pretty close, was one in snakes. And so what their conclusion was, and we don't know that this is in fact true, but this was their conclusion, was that in the Wuhan animal market, there must have been a snake that had a mutated coronavirus, which they're now calling NCOV. Somebody either ate it or was close to it or somehow got contact with it, and that virus just started to replicate inside of that person, and that person spread it. And as we'll see in the Lancet article, which we'll also put a link to in our description below, they found a whole family that had this virus that were hospitalized. And we'll talk about the symptoms and the mortality and things of that nature here coming up in our second video. This is what they think is going on in China with the coronavirus. And this is big news right now, because millions and millions of people are quarantined in China as I'm making this video. So in our next video, we'll talk about the symptoms and what they're doing for treatment, vaccines, and what you can do to prevent you getting this coronavirus. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, great.
Yeah, that was our first little informational video on the coronavirus. As you have heard, technically, Psych as well as I have a coronavirus, but there is not the coronavirus. The coronavirus, or the so-called coronavirus D, is a whole giant stem of viruses.
Sorry.
Excuse me.
See?
It's-
Oh no.
Yeah, we both have colds.
Oh no, we're all gonna get sick.
Also, yes.
What's the
Also,
right
I'm
with
just
VR,
curious.
mate? We can't catch it.
Exactly. That's the benefit of VR. I'm just curious. How many people here? Just a quick poll. How many people here currently have a cold? Thumbs up if you have a cold. Thumbs down if you don't have a cold. Just curious.
Jesus, mate. I don't have enough human interaction. I got no friends.
Oh my
What are you
God.
talking about, mate?
Wow.
yeah,
Twitter
it's,
friends.
Wow. It seems like things are. It seems like there's a lot more going around right now than like
it's cold
in the
season.
past. But
It's normal.
yeah,
Man, a lot of
that's true. That's true.
But yeah, do you want to show the second video as well, or should
I
we
think
first
we're
go through the
okay.
numbers?
Yeah, I think we can go through, and then we have extra time at the end. We can come back to it maybe.
Okay. This new system is not great.
Yeah. Also, this is my fault because I got the slides only at the last minute and didn't emphasize deadline, so Ghoster didn't have time to actually test things. So
Yep.
I
Okay,
apologize
so
for
the
that.
first question we all ask ourselves:
Yeah.
Will it kill us all?
Reduce ghost.
And to determine that, I ran a few simulations and statistics because that's what we bioengineers do. Because there is some relatively complex mathematical ways to predict the spread of a virus. And I can tell you right now, it is not as bad as people make it sound. No, it's not Umbrella Corp that sent this virus out there. No, this biolab, I mean, this is an existing biolab in China, but it's not in Wuhan. It's in Shanghai. I researched that. So the whole meme is wrong. But who cares? It's a meme. And yeah, to determine will the virus kill us all, like in the common known game Plague Inc., for example. What I basically did is I simulated the growth and the spread of the coronavirus over the next 150 days. And
She played the app game.
Yeah,
no,
pandemic.
I took numbers
from
the World
God's
Health
been playing that
Organization,
game
the
all along.
WHO provided, and basically did a lot of math and numbers, but that stuff is boring, so nobody really wants to see it anyways. And Psych and Ghosted can
Yeah, I'd
both
like to
confirm
see
that
it.
I managed to predict relatively clearly the number of infections as of today. So yeah, first of all, that is... Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I totally forgot about that part.
Oh, it's okay.
My concept is completely thrown over. First of all, to know if it kills us all or not, we have to understand what the coronavirus is. First of all, the current 2019 novel coronavirus, how it's called, is one out of 80 or so known viruses in the family of the Coronaviridae. And yeah, two of the other well-known and relatively well-spread viruses from that family are SARS and MERS. They also were mentioned in the video, maybe a little background on them. The SARS pandemic also started in China in 2002. Ended with about 8,000 infections and 774 dead people thanks to SARS, which is a mortality rate of roughly 10%. The MERS pandemic had only about 2,500 infections from 2012 to 2016, with 858 people dead, which is 34% of the patients
still-
that did not survive it.
Is it still
Compared
what?
to that,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Then I'll ask a question after.
yeah, compared to that, Corona is actually relatively harmless. Because if we look at the numbers, I hope I get the numbers. No, I don't, because I tapped out of it again. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
That is not the number that I wanted. That is also not the number that I wanted. That is the one that I wanted. These are the rates of people dying to the novel coronavirus up to yesterday. As you can see, we have 426, or we had 426 people dying yesterday. We are currently at 492 people that died of the coronavirus. But if you compare that to the general infection rate, you will quickly notice that it's not too much, because at the current state we have 24,554 registered infections. There is more, because not everyone who has the coronavirus is registered as one, mainly because the hospitals in Wuhan are completely flooded with people. So if you compare this to, this is the slide, the actual mortality rate, you will see that we only have a mortality rate of roughly 2%. And the trend is going down due to the fact that we slowly start to find effective treatments for the coronavirus, so it's expected to be way lower than that.
What are the
So-
rates of other diseases?
SARS and MERS, for example, two other coronaviruses, were at 10 to 30% of lethality.
Mm.
I guess compared to like the flu.
Yeah.
Is it more
Compared
similar
to
to
the
that?
common flu, the biggest problem with the common flu is that the common flu is an influenza virus, and most of the cases are never getting reported, therefore they never get into the statistics. And
Oh.
yeah,
Okay.
Even though
I
so you
didn't
can get
there's no
vaccinated, but then
numbers
don't
on
you?
that.
So
And what
Oh,
makes
yeah.
something a pandemic exactly? Like how much? What's the what qualifies?
That's what I'm getting into in a second. First of all, maybe the
Cool.
slide that I skipped, because I'm stupid, and why is that?
The UI is not intuitive, I'm sure.
what's that?
This one. How do you know when you have the coronavirus? There's basically 4 main symptoms that indicate that you could have corona. First of all is relatively high fever. The next one is myalgia, which is basically muscle pain. The next one, dry coughing. That's linked to pneumonia, and that is the worst part about this virus. That is what kills most of the people, because the coronavirus is only a very limited danger to a healthy person. The people that died from it so far, in most of the cases, they had a weak immune system or lung sicknesses that they had before Corona broke out that got worsened and led to the death. Pika, yeah.
Mm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
question about the pneumonia that comes with the coronavirus. Is that because obviously pneumonia is bacterial. It's a bacterial infection in the lungs. So are those lung right? Isn't it?
Pneumonia just
No,
means water
it's
in
not.
the lungs, if I'm not mistaken.
Pneumonia is actually on the most basic level, it's damage to the organic tissue in the lungs that basically limits the transmission between the oxygen transmission between the bloodstream and the air in the lungs. That is basically the very base of pneumonia. It can be caused by bacterial infections that have it as a side effect, but it's well, it can have multiple causes. It's just a symptom. That's the point.
Okay.
So,
I
yeah.
thought it was specifically bacterial. That's what I thought.
No, it's
Okay.
not.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for clearing that up.
Any other questions? So yeah, under the background that basically only pneumonia, the pneumonia. I can't even speak anymore.
You don't say the
goddammit.
P.
The P is silent.
The P is silent.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Pneumonia.
language.
I'm English
It's
is a weird
okay.
language, and I'm not a native speaker.
I know. That's why I'm telling
Yeah,
you.
you're doing a great job.
So yeah, it's pneumonia. Okay, pneumonia. So yeah,
Yeah,
that
you
is
got it.
basically the
Yeah,
thing
maybe-
that
it's
causes the
like-
most deaths in combination with other sicknesses.
Hmm.
With lethality rate of roughly 2%, trend going downwards. So yeah, what do we bioengineers do with that? We bioengineers can have a lot of fun with that data, and we can. Oh, that's the wrong one. We can run a simulation. You see the you see the blue curve. That is the predicted development of the coronavirus spread, of the infections. It's a relatively simple mathematical model that's also used to model population growth in a limited environment. So it is a medium complex equation that I don't want to explain here because that's stuff that takes a while. But yeah, I basically modeled the future of the coronavirus outbreak over the next 150 days. And what I got to is this.
Hmm.
This is first of all not so cool because according to the simulation, by the mid of April, we will have a total number of infections of 1.5 billion infections worldwide, and a lethality rate of about 33 million casualties. There's just a problem. The simulation is wrong. Because what the simulation does, well, this simulation assumes a few things. First assumption. Every patient that had the coronavirus will stay infective and will keep spreading the virus. Second assumption, there will be no cases of actual healing from the virus. Third assumption, we won't be able to limit the spread of the virus in any way. And fourth assumption, we won't be able to cure the symptoms.
Hmm.
All four of those assumptions are wrong.
So
I
you're
can't
saying that
predict the
Madagascar
development-
never closes its borders?
Exactly.
Basically,
So,
yes.
like, what if like
So
if you
what I
actually
did
get the
then
data?
is I tried to optimize my simulation in a way that it respects at least some of those points. I can't predict the development of a medicament because it's literally just people work on it, they try their best. It's done as soon as it's done, but I can't tell when it's done because I can't foresee the future. I also can't foresee what kind of countermeasures certain states will take, what quarantines they will implement. So I mainly focused on the fact, and that already has a giant impact, that people won't stay infected for the rest of their life. So
And
I
one-
reran this simulation under the assumption that after you get infected for the period of 20 days, you keep spreading the virus, and suddenly we have a new picture. Suddenly it looks like this, the yellow curve. Only affecting one of those four parameters already showed or led to a drastically different result. For the very
which
simple reason,
Which parameter was this again? Sorry, you said after 20 days you stopped spreading
basically-
it?
Yep.
Okay.
which is what we currently assume. We currently determine the incubation time and the follow-up spreading period for
God damn
about
it.
14 days, 14 to 20.
Hmm.
And yeah, what basically
I'm
happens,
having a party. It's my birthday in April.
the virus overeats itself and dies out. Relatively drastically. And in this case we only peak at about 800 million infections and 18 million casualties, which might sound like a lot, and yes it is, but if you compare that to statistics, it's roughly a 0.2% chance to die on the coronavirus. which is a fourth of the chance to die in a normal traffic accident. So
Yeah.
it's
true.
already just 4 times as likely to get run over by a car, whatever, than die from the coronavirus.
So I'm kind of confused. I'm kind of confused here though. But like, what? So even if it's limited to 20 days of being able to infect other people, why wouldn't it continue to increase? Like, what suddenly
Because,
changes?
The thing is, if you look at the equation, what suddenly changes is that the equation goes from the assumption that stuff that I calculated out of the values I had from the current spread. We currently have a new daily infection rate of about 23 to 25%. So a 25% increase of infections per day, which leads to this drastic curve. The thing is, if you basically just do that whole thing mathematically, you get a curve that would increase to a certain point and then just skyrocket. So you limit that whole thing with adding in another parameter. You know what? We have pens. I can just draw out
Yes.
the equation really quick.
Yeah.
I just know where
Oh,
the
they're
pens-
behind you.
Oh, there.
Go right over here.
So yeah, the equation that this whole concept is based off is basically the amount of infections x of the day n equals the spreading factor, let's name it k. In this case it's roughly 1.25 because 25% increase daily times the amount of infections on the day before that, and I assume the IK is dying again.
It's not great, the IK.
Yeah. Is n no x n minus 1. So this is basically the very basic assumption. We have a growth rate of roughly 125% a day. This would just make everything skyrocket. So what we instead do is we add in another factor, which basically mathematically makes the whole curve stop as soon as we hit the limit, which is in this case
Hey there, how you?
the x n minus 1. This is the amount. Let's name it the z in this case. K is the daily increment. Z is the general population density.
Excuse me, could you activate the screen again? I think late joiners aren't seeing it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh,
That's okay. It's just a VR chat thing. There you go.
There it is.
thank you.
And yeah.
So what
This
is the
equation
parameter that you...
leads to the blue curve. Z is the general population amount, and K is the increase rate of daily the daily increase rate. This formula is generally used in biology to model population growth, but it also is used to theoretically determine the spread of something like that. Yeah, Beijings?
Yes. So, do you now? Obviously, you said you changed one factor to be a little more realistic, and it shows this strong curve downward. And there's going to be
Yes.
multiple factors that are going to be better. But do you think that this pandemic will lead to over 1 million dead within the next 4 to 5 months? Because the deaths will be very concentrated in a small area, and that'll be pretty catastrophic.
It really depends. If you're in this simulation on a smaller scale, I could redo the whole thing for just the Wuhan region. It would lead to a way smaller amount of population because of the fact that the saturation of the virus inside the Wuhan region is already relatively high. what this doesn't respect is any kinds of quarantines. So this simulation basically assumes that the virus spreads worldwide and that you have giant outbreaks in every other country.
Okay.
So it won't just wipe out the Wuhan region.
It's also the yellow curve is taking into the fact that after a certain amount of time, the person, as long as it doesn't kill them, eventually becomes immune to it.
Yeah.
Or they get healthy again. Like it gets out of their system and they're no longer infectious.
Yep, pretty much. And yeah.
I have something to say about his answer though, because okay, I live in China, so basically this has happened around me, and I live basically right next to the Wuhan region. And so we have like official sources that inside China, sometimes it's not very easily to be seen by, people in other countries. So there has been some, we have an official Mythbuster column saying that, after you cure, like for people with like relatively strong immune system, like young people, after they cure themselves from this virus, they will be immune to it for like 2 weeks. But after that, you're still in danger. So you can catch it, like you can actually catch it again.
Wow.
Yeah, just
Yes,
one
that is
little
actually
thing.
still taken
Wow.
in by this curve. It's not completely renewing out them. It's basically what the whole equation is doing. This is just a very simple form of it, not what led to the yellow curve, because the yellow curve also implements adding in earlier amounts of people and removing certain groups that are in a certain window of time behind that basically leads to everything oversaturating. Maybe a short or another a little thing to the curve. This is the world population in case everything is spread free. If we look at an isolated region, we like for example the Wuhan region, we still can apply we can still technically apply the same curve. We just have to change the scale. So if we, for example, don't say there's 7.75 billion people on this axis, instead just 40 million, or however are in the directly affected area, we could still apply the curve and suddenly the numbers get a lot smaller.
Interesting. Pika, I see that you have a comment, and then also Max. Thanks for sharing. I'm very curious also to ask you some questions about the general quarantine as well.
Yeah.
Once we
Yes,
about
So
that
can I-
I do
experience.
have a question about the quarantine because of your outcome predictions within this mathematical curve, and some numbers are coming out that more people are recovering. What is the reasoning behind trying to clamp down on this new virus as like this massive effort from it becoming like a seasonal flu? Like what
Yeah,
is
that's
the
what I wondered
reasoning
too.
behind that?
What makes it
The
different?
reason why this thing is so big is, first of all, the transmission rate. We have a daily increase in a non-isolated area of about 25% of infections, versus less than 5% for stuff like the common flu. And also way smaller amounts for other infections. If you look at SARS and MERS, for example, both of them had infection rates of less than 2%.
Oh,
So
so like what about but it doesn't have the mortality rate of like rabies or Ebola. So
yeah, no, it doesn't. But the speed it spreads with is what makes this dangerous. It has a small
Okay.
mortality rate, but a giant transmission rate. If you're sitting in a room with a coronavirus patient, with a person who actively has the virus, if you're sitting in a room with the virus, you have a 25% of getting infected. Basically.
So it's the latency period while being contagious,
yes.
plus the Okay, that's why.
Now
Okay.
Yeah, the one thing I've ever understood is that they say that or I've heard that you can go a period. One dangerous thing about this is that you can be contagious while you're asymptomatic, and so then
Yes.
But one question I have there is that if you're asymptomatic, then aren't you not expelling and coughing and doing the behaviors that would lead to the transmission? Or how are you transmitting it if you're just kind of not symptomatic?
It's basically an airborne virus. That means simply by the fact that you're breathing it in and out, you could transmit it. So
Oh,
technically
not-
it would already be enough
oh.
if I was standing right next to you and you were breathing there, I was breathing here, you breathe out. Tiny little bubbles of water that are infected with the virus. I breathe them in. I get the virus.
So if this had the mortality
Oh.
rate of Ebola, like everyone would be like really freaking out.
Yes and no, because if you look at this tiny little red line down here, that's actually the amount of deaths taking an account of the yellow curve. If this was way higher, the amount of existing infectious people would be way lower, which would slow down the spread rapidly.
Oh.
Interesting. Max, did you
Okay.
have a...
I wanted to, because we have a lot of, news report, and now we have, in China, we have state, like province governments reporting to the central government every day during our social media accounts. So they report every day how many new cases they have, and some cities, they include how they are getting affected. So just to give everybody an image about how it can be spreading so fast. There is one case that I read basically yesterday. It was an official announcement. So there was this guy. He's infected, but he's not showing any symptom, and he was not really careful, so he didn't wear any mask. And he was shopping at a street food stand, something, it's a shop. And there's another woman standing next to him. For 15 seconds, she was not wearing a mask as well. They didn't do anything. They weren't coughing. They were just buying stuff at the same shop. Standing there for 15 seconds, and the woman got it. And then the
Oh my
woman
God.
went home and infected her whole family. Yes,
Wow.
that's how
Literally-
fast it can spread.
Oh
And
my
now-
god, that's terrifying.
Yes, and now, so wear mask, people. So now, we can see that it's spreading very fast. And I have another news is that even though you are not showing any symptom, you are still carrying the virus. So there's another case that one woman, she is infected with the virus. She is not showing any symptoms. She's young. Her immune system is strong, and during the 20 days, she also infected her whole family and friends, but she was fine. She was not showing any symptom, and she cured herself, but her whole family is sent to the hospital. So it changed the virus
Wow.
on people
Yeah.
a lot.
I'm one of those people. I tend to act as a carrier.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So yeah,
It's
that's
that-
a really good point. That's the
Thank you,
other
thank you.
thing.
It's fascinating.
And I think for that we can show the second video really quick, because it just visualizes it relatively good.
Yeah.
Where the drawings? Is there a mass erase button?
Cram.com.
Oh yeah, just click the other.
Welcome
you
to
go.
another
Okay, good.
MedCram update on coronavirus. As of yesterday, it was 170 deaths and 7,783 confirmed infectious cases. This update is for January 31st, 2020. And so overnight, we've gone to unfortunately 213 deaths and 9,776 confirmed infections, most of those in mainland China. And this data is coming from the WHO and other healthcare agencies coming together. It's about a 26% increase in the number of confirmed infections and a 26% increase in the number of deaths. Now, I notice I've got a lot of comments about the potential fallacy of dividing the numerator here, which is the number of deaths, which is current, divided by the number of infections, which may have not matured to the effect that they may have caused mortality because it may be too early in the course. And I understand that, and a lot of people do understand that. The problem is the incubation period can vary quite long. And so, do you go back 1 week to see what the case infection rate is? Do you go back 3 days? And so if you really want to figure out what this is, of course, you wait to the very end until the epidemic is over, which will hopefully be very soon. And then you take that numerator and divide it by that denominator, and you will get what the case fatality rate is. Unfortunately, we can't do that in the middle of it. And as we'll talk about very shortly, the incubation may not be as long as we think, which is fortunately a good thing. However, there's a trade-off in this situation, as we'll talk about in the Germany case very shortly, where there may be asymptomatic shedding of the virus. And that brings us to the other point, is yes, while there may be an underestimation of the mortality rate by looking at the current numerator and dividing it by the current denominator, there's also the possibility of way overestimating the mortality rate. If there's a bunch of asymptomatic infections where people get it and they get better, then this denominator down here is actually way bigger than we think it is. If that's the case, well, then this mortality rate is much less than 2%. It's hard to say exactly what it is at this point. Suffice to say that if you want to look at an easy way of comparing how the mortality rate is changing over time, simply take the current fatality rate and divide it by the current estimated infection rate. We're probably underestimating both the numerator and the denominator here because there's just not enough kits to go around to test everybody. If you think about it, in China, they're not going to be testing people who might have a little bit of malaise if they've got a hospital full of people with pneumonia. Those are the ones that are going to get tested. And so what you may be seeing here in China is people who are very ill getting tested for the coronavirus. And that may make the mortality rate go higher because you're selectively testing people that are sicker. Whereas here in the United States, we're testing anybody who sneezes wrong that's come from China. And so we may be picking up a lot of asymptomatic cases. And that may be the reason why all of the deaths that we are seeing are almost exclusively from China. And nobody outside of China in the United States, nobody has really come down with a serious illness. So these are observations. These are not facts. We don't know yet. These are hypotheses. So to keep it simple, we're going to go ahead with the current mortality rate divided by the current infection rate. Not saying that that is the mortality rate, but it's certainly a way to track it. And so you're comparing apples to apples. But the total infection rate is way past SARS now. We are treading on new territory when it comes to viral epidemics. And that brings us to the other news, which of course the WHO has now said that this is a serious global emergency in terms of a virus. Now, the other big news today is in Riverside, which is close to home for me because that's the county that I work in Southern California. And I actually worked with the public health officer for Riverside County, Dr. Kaiser, who today had to forcibly quarantine a patient who was on the March Air Reserve Base who wanted to leave. And of course, that caused him to be in isolation until deemed unnecessary or 2 weeks. So what they're currently doing right now at March Air Reserve Base is this plane, which has about 195 passengers, are now voluntarily, except for one, because he tried to leave, staying on the base for 72 hours. And during that time, they're doing a lot of screening. They are checking for temperature. They're doing
Where'd the
nasal
plane
swabs.
come from? China?
At the end of those 72 hours, if everything is
Also, you
A-okay,
American one.
then they are free to go. Of course, you may say, aha, they're in Southern California, let them stay in Southern California. Well, these people are from all over the United States, and I'm sure as soon as they are let go, they will be coming to your area of the woods. So let's explore a little bit about what's happened in terms of our knowledge over the last couple of days over this virus and how it behaves in terms of incubation period and in terms of the type of illnesses that it causes and also the ability for it to shed, because there's a lot of interesting information that we're about to get into here that has been published recently in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it's hot off the press. We will give you a link in the description below, but let's get into that. Okay, so this is a drawing that is based on a figure in that New England Journal of Medicine article. And what we've got is 5 people here. We've got the index patient, and we've got patient 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is all happening in Germany, and these are all dates in January here below. Okay, so the first thing that happened here is that there was a business meeting that was occurring, and this index patient here was actually from China. And they flew over to Germany to have and attend a business meeting. And this meeting occurred over the period of the 19th to the 22nd. So who was at that business meeting? Well, these two people here who are German natives attended the business meeting with index patients. Everything was fine. Nobody was having symptoms. And the index patient, well, she hopped on a flight on the 22nd here and goes back to China and starts developing symptoms almost immediately after she gets on the flight. Okay? She goes back to China, and of course there's the big rage of what's going on, and she has the symptoms. So what does she do? She goes and gets tested. And she goes and gets tested over here on the 26th. Meanwhile, what happens is patient number 1, who was at the meeting, he starts developing symptoms on the 24th, mild symptoms. So a cough, fever, malaise, all the sorts of things that you would assume would go along with the flu. And his symptoms get worse, and then they get better. Now, the index patient, she gets tested here on the 26th, PCR, and it's positive. As soon as it gets positive, she goes back and she calls her company, and they do a trace back to try to figure out all the people that she may have come in contact with so they can figure out where to test. And of course, by this point, patient number 1's like, well, yeah, I had a little bit of flu symptoms, but I'm fine now. So they check him the next day on the 27th. Okay? PCR positive. Boom. But he's asymptomatic. He's gotten better from his mild symptoms. They're really not that bad anymore. Nevertheless, they go ahead and they test him. They check for viral loads. They see if there's virus in his saliva, virus in his sputum. And guess what? He has a high viral load, even though he is not symptomatic. In other words, he is contagious. And they find up to 10 to the 8th viral particles per milliliter. That's pretty high. Well, guess what? Patient 2, 3, and 4, they all start developing symptoms as well during the same time. Patient 2's symptoms last a little bit longer, and they test on the 28th. Of course, when he turns out positive, all hell breaks loose. And they're like, wow, what's going on here? And so a whole bunch of other people get tested. And so sure enough, patient 2 has a positive PCR. But remember, this patient number 2 attended the same meetings. And so it's very possible that this is how it worked. Okay? But here's the point that should blow you away. Patient 3 and 4 never attended the meetings. However, patient 3 and 4 did have contact with patient number 1. And they can actually map out when patient 3 and 4 had contact with patient number 1. And all of these contacts were before the patient actually had symptoms. So in other words, 3 and 4 started to develop symptoms, but they started to develop symptoms later, about a day later. So they developed symptoms on January 25th, January 26th, and of course they got tested with everybody else because they were all freaking out, of course. And sure enough, PCR was positive. So here's the take-home message. Number 1, it looks as though the incubation period here is fairly short. So that's a good thing. That means that you're going to find out quickly whether or not the patient has a virus. What's bad about this, though, is that you're able to spread the virus
coronavirus
both before and after, it seems, you have symptoms. In fact, we know that patient 3 and 4 got their virus from a patient who got it from the index patient here, and they got it before they had symptoms. So this begs the question, and it's a very interesting question, about what are we doing at March Air Reserve Base? Yes, if we were to watch them for 72 hours, which of course is 3 days, we should be able to pick up if any of them have symptoms, fevers, anything of that nature. But the question is, do we release them after 72 hours if they're all clean? And I think the debate is still going on that. Should you hold them for 2 weeks? Yeah, that would be safer for everybody, but you have to weigh the practicalities of holding them for 72 hours
with the PCR,
versus 2 weeks. And do you really need to do that if it looks as though the incubation period
I
here
was
is
just
pretty
home for a
short. So
whole
what are the
week.
big
For
take-home
what?
messages from this New England
Yeah.
Journal of Medicine article? Number one, the incubation period seems to be relatively short, maybe 3 or 4 days.
Texas.
Could be longer, could be shorter, but that seems to be what we're seeing here. Number two, even though you're asymptomatic, it seems pretty clear that you're able to shed and infect somebody else with the virus. Number three, it seems as though, at least here in this short cohort of 4 people, that all of these people had very mild symptoms. Everyone here so far is not in the hospital. They're not on a
That's
ventilator.
scary.
They seem to be doing just
could just
fine.
spread.
These were healthy people, though, in Germany. So
Can't
it's
tell, yeah.
sometimes hard to actually generalize this to everyone. All right, more updates as they come. Thank you for joining us.
Wow, that was fascinating. That's the scary part, is that you could just, a bunch of people could be asymptomatic, and continuing to spread it, and they're just assuming that they. Yeah.
And especially in combination with the transmission methods, it really is a scary thing.
Yes, I am curious. Just Max, I'm so excited that that you came, because you're in China, and like I have another question for you as well. And I know we're heading towards the end, because we're getting towards about an hour as well. But before Deadly, did you have any more slides as well? These have been great. These are.
I had.
I think there was one more.
Actually.
So I'm curious about the quarantine experience as well that's happening in China. They're cutting
Yes,
off
I
all
can
cities.
explain
Feedback on
it
that as
all.
well. I live in Fujin.
Oh, great. Okay, yeah. So I want to hear you guys' experiences about that in a second.
You had a drone yell at you, didn't you? You told that in the chat, didn't you?
It didn't actually yell at me. It just followed me around for a while.
Oh yeah. Come up here. Tell about that. Yeah, he mentioned that in my
Why?
Shiba Squad chat.
So I went for a jog just next to a park in my area, and they've got the park pretty much on lockdown because they don't want a lot of people going in, but people were still going in, including myself. They had guards. I went for a jog for about 30 minutes. I didn't want to go any longer because the drone started bothering me. And of course, when I get home, they have the guard at my community taking my temperature. 34.9 degrees Celsius right now. They do that every time you go in or out. And they take pictures when they do it.
Wow. Oh my god. That's crazy. They're just taking the temperature every. Wow.
Sorry.
But
Every time you go outside, I'm guessing.
Oh wait,
wow.
I wonder if you're going for a run, wouldn't your body temperature raise?
Yeah, it should have, but I had a long cooldown where I just walked, so it lowered.
Okay, but like if you ran up to the, but what do you do if you run up to the gate, basically? They'll know that you just got done with your exercise.
Oh, they would probably think that I was having a fever because I would keep running.
So
Temperature would have been higher, yeah.
Sorry.
that's fascinating. And so,
I pressed the wrong button.
Deadly, where'd Deadly go? Uh-oh, they might have.
It's the coronavirus.
They might have crashed.
Coronavirus got her.
Oh my god. But Max, while we have Max and anyone else who's in China, like, so, I know that whole cities have been basically quarantined or cut off. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, do you know people who are just stuck inside their houses? Like, how extreme has it gotten? And then also, the other question I have is, there's been some talk in the U.S., and this is I've read on forums, so it might not be accurate, that China might be trying to underplay things, or maybe controlling information in certain ways about, like, what's getting out. So when you're reading these things, is it like, this is exactly what's happening, or are people kind of questioning what the narrative is there? Or, I'm just curious for you guys in China.
Okay, as a I don't know if you're a native Chinese, but I am native Chinese. I was born and raised in China. I have been living here for 22 years, and now I'm still living here. I haven't gone out of my house for about 15 or 20 days already. Like, literally, no, not even one step out of my house. So I've been playing VR a lot. So
VR is supposed to be amazing for that.
Yes. So right now, I live in my own community, and we are like one province away from Wuhan. So basically, this is Wuhan, this is Chongqing, and this is Sichuan. This is where I live. And it's really, really close to each other, but we are not in Wuhan. So the quarantine measure we have in our little community is that every time you go, we have 3 gates at our little community, but there's only 1 open left. And every time you go in and go out, they take your temperatures. And if your temperature is too high, because like if you're running, they will ask you to, maybe sit there for a while and cool down and then take your temperature again. And you have to have a permit to prove that you actually live in this community. They would give you a little permit and you have to show it every time you want to go in and go out. And they have to take down your names every time.
Let me
I
clarify.
saw the name
so,
taking,
like,
but they never took mine.
outside of China, I don't know like if it's prevalent in like especially like the Western culture is convinced that like Chinese government big bad always lies to so like everyone's always questioning the numbers coming out of China when they report because they expect like the what the USSR did, where they try to downplay an entire disaster like they did with Chernobyl.
I would say that this
Can I
is
say something?
partially true, because
Okay.
Really?
first of all, I'm native Chinese. I know how Chinese people and how Chinese government works. So basically, this the lockdown on Wuhan should happened way earlier, and it's agreed all across China. It should have happened like way earlier, so it wouldn't spread all that fast. But why did it? Did the mayor and the the leader they postpone it? Because they were trying to deal with it themselves. They were trying to control the situation themselves, so they don't have to report to the higher levels. Because if they have, like incidents like this, if they report, it's a bad thing. They will take blame. So they will try to hide it and deal with it and
Interesting.
deal with it themselves. And if they actually, solve the problem, they won't have to report. They will not take the blame. So
So that's
I would
why
say,
Fascinating.
but now, yes, but
the
now
big
the thing has.
spectacle of having like so I saw when the whole like Wuhan's building a hospital and they had like 100 excavators in the same area and it was just so like
Yes.
outrageous. Like, how is that even efficient at all? What are you doing?
King size crematorium. Yeah.
Wait.
And crew, yeah, crew.
Because
Did you have a thought?
Let me talk about peak meeting. The way they're doing that is with that many workers, it'll take them like 20 days to build a whole hospital and get ready in 20 days.
It's actually not
Interesting.
20 days, it's like 12.
Visually, it looked very stunning.
Wow.
It did. But now,
Yeah.
So, crew, did you have another point? Did you have another point that you wanted to make?
So-
Yeah.
so I want to know this. So 2 things.
I just say I'd never seen anything like it.
Hold on.
Now,
Yeah.
don't think that I'm thinking of this. I was told this. Do y'all eat bats?
Why would you
Very
ask
small
that,
portion
though?
of the country eats bats.
It's
I
like
don't even know for sure if that's where it came from. Seriously.
Yeah.
okay,
but-
there's like this. People joke with me like, "Do you eat dogs? Do you eat cats?" I'm like, "No, I don't. I have never eaten a dog or a cat before." But there's like in some rural areas, people do it like a festival thing, like really, really
Dog
small
eating
portion.
festival.
Yes,
Remember which ramen
grilling,
sets in?
Ooh, man.
grilling,
Oh yeah.
So-
grilling dog
Okay.
meat festival.
Crew, did you have
And
another
also,
question that's related to the? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Max. But I also want to keep us on topic because we have to wrap up soon.
So as well as about the bats, because everyone's saying that the coronavirus came from bats.
But
And
it's not
identified with the
actually
snake.
really.
Today we learned it's from a snake.
Oh,
Wow.
great.
That
Yeah.
video is
So lion
actually
things.
from like 1 or 2 weeks ago. So in our official site, people have been saying we have updated news like every day. So at first it says that it's probably from snakes, and then it changed to probably from bats. But now it says nothing because the cause is not like really, because there have been people having symptoms and having pneumonia way earlier than they are people in the seafood market. So they say it's from the seafood market. That is because the Wuhan government they were trying to hide it even before the seafood stuff.
Mm.
It's actually unclear where it actually started. But because of Wuhan government trying to, they were trying to hide it and deal with it themselves, and now it's everywhere. They're not unable to hide it, so they would have to give you a cause or somewhere to start. So they say, it's over there.
So it did start in the
Fascinating.
lab.
They
Some people are
We
saying
don't
that there's
know about
evidence
that.
of the
We don't know
RNA
about
sequences inside the virus
They,
strain have been manipulated by people.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's what I
about
read
the
too.
bad,
Speaking
bad
of
Sounds,
that,
this
question.
sounds a lot like the Reddit coronavirus. This is starting to sound like the Reddit
Subreddit.
thread.
Yeah, I agree.
this sounds
Yeah.
like Plague Inc. It's like
there's only
Plague Inc. all
3
over again.
pages here in Texas and over here in Dallas who are being tested for possible coronavirus. There's 3 of them.
So,
3 of them
So
right now.
hold on,
okay,
guys.
so
we
I've-
gotta end in a
I've
sec.
read-
Pika.
Okay,
Let's
I've
quickly
read-
go. Yeah, Pika and then Schmoodle, and then we'll have to wrap up.
Okay, so
and
I've
Deadly
read-
crashed, by the way.
The worst case scenario through all this, let's say if it's not contained, it becomes another seasonal flu disease that you have to worry about, along with influenza, the common cold, and then you have coronavirus, like whatever this would be named. That's what they're trying to clamp down on, is that it doesn't become a seasonal flu, and the transmission rate is just scarily high.
Yes.
That being
What the
said,
hell?
like, it's just
Sorry.
saw the
gosh.
graphic. It's not gonna eliminate
Good
all
grief.
life on Earth,
It's too deadly to do
and
that.
because and I know that people are worried because of the recent jump from animal to human. It's very highly likely that it can mutate again.
Yes.
Mhm.
Interesting. That's a okay. Schmoodle, do you wanna one last thought before we wrap up?
Oh, I was just gonna say that Deadly Crash. We said it already.
Oh yeah. So Deadly crash, and they're trying to get back in, but I'm not sure if they're gonna. Looks like they're having trouble.
I'm in a call with her right now. She's having Steam VR as being Steam VR.
Okay.
Hmm.
The
Uh,
Chinese government's on lockdown.
well, yes. Yeah, maybe she can come in on desktop mode if she's able to get back. But it's yeah, maybe see if that's possible. And yeah, Deadly did a great job. I'm very, thank you to Deadly for this awesome presentation. I think it was fascinating, and thank you guys too.
Is
for coming.
Coming down.
Is Daily a part
Sorry I
of the
couldn't come
Come
earlier. I
back
slept in.
straight. That's okay.
She's
Crew, what'd you
a
ask?
microbiologist.
Oh, microbiologist, yeah.
Oh.
And one thing for all the new people here, just for context before we wrap up, I'm hoping Deadly can get back here before we wrap up. But
What'd I say?
this is Endgame, like a talk show. And if you guys, we have like open discussions and stuff like that, so you guys can join our Discord if you go to endgamevr.com. We have a Discord and we try to discuss these kinds of things and have shows and talk about it like once a month approximately. We haven't had one in a while, but hopefully we'll have more often. And
Yeah, psych. Why haven't we had one in a while?
shame. I know, because I'm doing my PhD and running a company at the same time, and it's
Oh wow.
but yeah,
Deadly
I know,
is
I knew-
back.
yay, Deadly,
Oh.
Deadly. But
I
it's kind of, I love that it's deadly. A
Ah,
virus.
There she goes. She's going in there. Thing.
Deadly
She went
is
into the
talking
room.
about a virus that's not deadly. That hopefully will not be deadly.
Oh god.
Exactly.
It
And
just
last,
showed
we're
up
gonna
in
take a group
Susan's
picture
face.
after we wrap up, guys. We try to keep it to an hour to respect everyone's time and everything. Yay, you're back. Deadly, Deadly.
Yay!
Hey.
Yay,
Nice.
welcome back. So we have to wrap up. But any final thought that you want to share about this topic with the audience and everybody?
My conclusion about the coronavirus is, first of all, yes, we should take this outbreak seriously because it has the potential to cause a lot of damage. No, we should not start to panic because we're not going to die. And with that said, everyone, you know the symptoms. If you have that, it's better to consult your doctor. Don't
What are the
hesitate to
symptoms?
go to a doctor. Um, the symptoms are. Maybe let me list them once
Yeah,
more.
pneumonia.
Dry
Fever.
cough, fever.
And also, one important thing is that if you're it's interesting, Max, that you mentioned this, that you haven't left your house in 15 to 20 days and you're using VR. Like, that's,
There you
it's
go.
pretty interesting how VR does allow for social interaction
You know
without the
what?
risk of
You know what?
contagion.
That's
So.
not
Did a lot of
good.
push-ups,
It's
so I
like-
have no idea.
She's like
second one.
the guy who spent a week in VR.
Yeah, but you're spending 15
Yeah.
days, which sounds difficult.
Yeah.
But cool.
You know
Well-
what? Study it went viral on YouTube. Ah,
Oh,
viral.
God.
yes.
Every
So,
symptoms are
uh,
really hard
You
to
really have to say that.
to really notice.
cool guys. Well, guys, we have
You
to wrap
push-ups,
up.
There goes the
We
muscle
gotta
memory.
wrap up. So the last thing is to take a group picture. And Deadly, everyone, please thank Deadly for that awesome presentation. Great
you.
job,
Thank you.
Deadly. That was amazing.
Turn off the barrier.
And let me turn off.
Oh,
yeah,
wait,
security.
Can we get the first slide up here with the coronavirus?
Oh, that'd be great as a
Oh
background.
yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Oh yeah, there we
Ooh.
go. There's the beauty.
Nice. All right,
For anyone
guys,
who
security
wants
off.
to be Part of the
Did we turn it
coronavirus.
off?
You
Oh,
can
security
clone
off.
this
All right,
avatar.
let's go.
All right, come up on the stage, everybody.
Suck it. I'm already
Well,
scared of the
Yeah,
coronavirus, no matter
videos
what.
on YouTube if
Come
you
on,
wanna
this is
watch
pretty
it.
group
This definitely left
group
me
photo.
more scared than it did before, I think. Hello,
Group
Lika.
photo. Come on.
My hand
Sorry if I'm
goes.
late.
Hey, stranger.
That's okay.
I'm just
Catapult never showed up. Where is he? I'm
I
sad.
know.
Oh,
Freeman.
Hopefully not.
Freeman, get
having
up here.
coronavirus.
Freeman.
Freeman, no, Freeman.
Freeman, he's
Stop
AFK. No.
No.
I think he's
Wake
still
up,
up.
Freeman.
Dang it. You
Jack.
dang soul.
Come back, Jack.
Presentation might have been very boring.
Alright,
Freeman.
I'm just gonna do this.
aw.
I'm just gonna look through this.
Corona.
The corona.
Corona!
Corona extra with very.
Got it. Yay. Awesome.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Finally, now we can.
I also
for
wonder
everybody.
if sales of Corona will increase as a
How you do-
result
how
of
you do
the
that?
virus.
Yeah, I'm really curious about
That
that.
is a Corona
They're
sweater.
rebranding
That's
to
one of the
it.
gestures.
Right, exactly.
I just.
That's
I
so
just-
good.
I hear that.
advertising even. That's great.
Yeah, videos will
Deadly,
be-
great job.
Yes, I
Oh,
like
sorry,
that.
I just ran through people.
Yeah,
Deadly, thank you,
for
thank you,
all the
thank you.
wonderful
That was
information.
amazing.
That was
I think that was
wonderful.
great.
Spread the corona.
Get it no matter what.